morning, everybody, and welcome to class number 2 of our 2026 virtual HOA and Condo Academy. Today is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026, and our topic for today is mastering meetings, annual and board meetings, and creating excellence for your HOAs and condos. We teach this Condo Academy and HOA Academy in partnership with the cities of Avondale, Chandler, Glendale, Goodyear, Mesa, Peoria, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Surprise, and Tempe. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I'm the founder and senior partner of the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. Our firm currently represents over 1,000 planned communities and condominium associations throughout the state of Arizona. I also currently serve on my HOA board and have for many years. Today's class is going to provide your board with some practical suggestions and strategies to plan and run successful annual and regular board meetings. No matter what the format is you use, whether it's in person, virtual, a hybrid of that, we're going to teach you how to boost participation, ensure that you're in compliance with Arizona law, streamline your agendas, and leverage technology for a productive meeting. Plus, we're going to help you discover creative ways to identify and keep volunteers for your community and foster a spirit of engagement and civility in your community and at your board and annual meetings. Whether you're prepping for annual meeting season, which we're right in that alley right now between January and May, where most of our clients have their annual meetings, or whether you're looking to improve your regular meeting, maybe make it an hour-long meeting only, and maybe not have a lot of conflict and confrontation at the meetings. This session today is going to give you the tools to lead with confidence and efficiency. Additionally, we want to note that many of our participating cities and neighborhood service and community engagement offices offer valuable information and resources, including neighborhood grants, to assist voluntary neighborhood associations and HOAs with enhancement and beautification projects, and various community building endeavors. We really encourage you to reach out and connect with your city's neighborhood or community engagement team in 2026 to inquire about their specific offerings. A great thing that you can do if you're listening in today after our class would be just to Google the city that you live in and the words like HOA and condo and see what different programs your city, town, or municipality offers for your associations that are in that particular city, town, or municipality. Also, grant season is coming up. Typically, the grant money for associations that is given out from cities, towns, municipalities, and counties resets July 1st. So right now is a great planning time for your association to be thinking about how you can be first in line to get that grant money. Typically, how grant money works is it's a 50-50 proposition. The association pays 50%. And if you are awarded the grant, the city, town, municipality, or county will pay the other 50%. It's a great deal for associations. And we've seen associations effectively use the grant money for installing lighting, security lighting in their associations, new signage, converting turf to desert landscaping. Lots of good opportunities out there and millions of dollars available for associations to take advantage of. As always, we're going to address questions at the end of our class today. We have kind of an informal question and answer typically at the end of the class. I will conclude the main presentation, hopefully right at noon, and we'll move right into questions at that time. Due to the large volume of attendees that we typically have in these classes, please note that there is one question per attendee limit. And if you're joining us on Zoom, please submit your question in the Q&A box. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, please type your question in the comments section. Okay, let's start out with our poll so we know who's here today. Before we dive into the seminar, I'd like to start off by getting a feel for who is in attendance today so I can tailor the information to best serve our participants. So the first question, and if you're joining us on Zoom, you're going to see this question on your screen. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you're just going to need to answer this question in the comment section. So in terms of which city do you reside, we would like for you to answer that question. And then the second question is, let us know what your current role is for your association. Okay, while we're waiting for those results to come back, I want to just do a quick update on what's going on in the Arizona legislature. As you may know, the Arizona legislature is a seasonal legislature, which means that they are only in session, typically between mid-January and until the end of June. So the session started on Monday, January 12th, and there have been a lot of HOA and condo bills this year that have been submitted. We currently have 38 bills that we are monitoring on behalf of associations to provide you with free information. We are going to be sharing with you our information, our summary of the bills that are currently pending in the legislature this year. And you can also find a copy of that on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. And we update that periodically throughout the month as there are changes that occur. And it's just right on our homepage. You just click on the link right on our homepage just to get a summary of the pending bills. Now, it's still early in the season, right? We're about a month and a week into the session. There's really only one bill that we are seeing that's kind of moving pretty quickly, and that's like the lighting of the address, putting lighting and address signs, etc. And so we're closely monitoring that bill. That seems to be moving. We're not opposed to that. We think that's a great idea. And so there's lots of other bills on a lot of different topics. I don't want to get into discussing each one of these pending bills because we don't know which ones are actually going to move this year. Oftentimes, there's only about 7 or 8 that are actually contenders that are going to move forward and get passed in the House or the Senate. And we really don't start talking about those actual contender bills until a little bit later, like usually March or April, when they actually start passing the House or the Senate. Then we'll start talking about, hey, we got to keep an eye on this bill and what it means for our industry. So just FYI, we have that information available for you on our website, and we are also going to be sharing it with you on Zoom and Facebook Live. Okay, let's go back and take a look at our poll results from today. I am so happy to see that we have every city, all 10 of the cities that are working with us to teach these classes represented today. 7% from Chandler, 4% from Glendale, 8% from Goodyear, 27% from Mesa, 7% from Peoria, 16% from Phoenix, 16% from Scottsdale, 8% from Surprise, and 5% from Tempe. So really great turnout today from all 10 of the cities that we're partnering with to teach these classes. Also, in terms of who's here today, in terms of their role, 68% of you are board members, 7% are community managers, and 18% are interested homeowners, and other would be 7%. So we have a great representation today of mainly board members, and interested homeowners would be the second category, and then great to see some managers here today too. Okay, let's dig into our topic for today. Actually, I think this is probably my favorite class to teach. It's right up there, with dealing with difficult owners, which is also kind of an interesting and fun class to teach. But this is something annual meetings, board meetings, this is something that every association has to deal with, that the board has to run regular board meetings. Typically, you're having them monthly. And every association in Arizona is required to have an annual meeting. So this class should apply to basically everybody in our industry because you have to have these meetings so that there's transparency and you're keeping your owners informed. We're going to start out first to talk a little bit about annual meetings and what are some tips that I have to have successful annual meeting. I've attended thousands of annual meetings over the past 29 years. And what we've done is we've taken our experiences and created a cheat sheet that talks just about how to have a successful annual meeting. So my office is going to be sharing that with all of you who are here with us on Zoom and also on Facebook Live. And if you are listening to this presentation after, the live presentation, you can also find this cheat sheet on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. And it's just called Annual Meetings. Okay, so let's just go through the basics of our, suggestions or our secret to have a successful annual meeting. The first thing that you need to be aware of is under Arizona law, and this is both in the Condominium Act and the Planned Communities Act, an association has to have an annual meeting of its members at least once a year. And conducting a successful annual meeting, takes planning, right? So you have to have it. And if you want to have a successful meeting, you're going to have to really back it out and plan, really about 3-4 months in advance of the meeting. And we're going to give you some tips on what you need to do. So typically, the association's bylaws are going to have information about when the annual meeting needs to occur, what the quorum is for the annual meeting, if you have to have secret ballots or if you can just use regular ballots, are nominations from the floor allowed at the annual meeting to elect directors, and what the voting requirements are for your association. So kind of the first thing that we do is we should be looking at the bylaws for instruction as to when the annual meeting should occur and all the other important facets of the annual meeting. And typically there is a section that's called annual meetings or meetings of membership right in the bylaws at the heading. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why we have an annual meeting. What's the purpose of an annual meeting? Really, the main purpose of the annual meeting is to elect directors for your association and then conduct any other business which may properly be coming in front of the board at that time. It could be a bylaw amendment, a CC&R amendment, a special assessment vote, increase an assessment rate that might be higher than what your documents allow the board to do, or higher than state law allows you to do. It's also a time for transparency. This is your time as a board to show your homeowners that you have things under control and that you're running the association, efficiently and effectively and in compliance with Arizona law. So typically the meeting starts and you establish a quorum, and you do that by those in attendance in person or those who've returned a mail-in or absentee ballot. So you count those two together, and that should be what the quorum is. And then typically the next thing that you do is you will have maybe like a report of the president, a treasurer's report, maybe the manager gives a report if you have a management company or a manager. Then you typically will collect the ballots for the election of directors. Maybe you do that at the beginning of the meeting. If people haven't voted yet and they came in person, they want to vote, you ask for the people to turn their ballots in. And typically during the meeting, people are in the back of the room counting the ballots for the election of the directors or any other vote that you're taking at the meeting. And the annual meeting also is a time to listen. If you're a board, this is the annual meeting of the homeowners. And so this is their time as homeowners to provide feedback to the board as to how we're doing. It's also a time to accept criticism with grace. It's also a time to listen to what owners want, for the community, and be respectful and nice as you're, accepting the feedback from the owners. Okay, so let's back it up a little bit and talk about how do we plan for a successful annual meeting. So first, got to look at your bylaws. Do your bylaws require you to have a nominating committee, which helps you select candidates to serve on the board? I'd say probably like 25% of the associations that we work with have a nominating committee that the association utilizes to help find candidates to serve on the board. Maybe the nominating committee is actually the board because you don't have a plethora of people who are willing to volunteer for your association on things like this. Maybe you don't have a nominating committee requirement in your bylaws, and instead you just need to solicit candidates. So really about 75 days in advance of the annual meeting, 90 would even be better, it's like the 3-month mark. It would be a good idea to send out a communication to the owners saying, hey, we've got an annual meeting coming up and we're looking for candidates to run for the board. If you're interested, please provide a bio using this form, a simple, easy form, just with their name, which, what's their address, what's their lot or unit number, and just a little bit about their background and why they want to serve on the board. Hopefully you get candidates who will, want to run for the board. or hopefully the nominating committee finds candidates who are willing to run for the board. If you're having trouble finding candidates at that point, what you might want to do is start having the board reach out to individuals directly and say, would you be willing to serve on the board? Look at your committees. Is there anybody on the committees who might be willing to serve on the board? Are there any owners who regularly come to the meetings who you think could provide good service to the association? Those are some kind of traditional channels to find board members. If you can't find anybody after you take all of those steps, then really you want to get your attorney involved and have your attorney write a letter to the association and explain the consequences of not being able to find board members to serve on the board. And ultimately, the consequences are we won't have a quorum if we don't have enough people. We won't be able to conduct business. If we don't have anybody running for the board or we don't have anybody willing to serve on the board, it's possible that the association could be put into a receivership where a receiver would run the association, and that's going to cost a lot more money for your association. And really the first thing that will happen is the court will be petitioned to set up a receivership, and then the court will just levy a special assessment to pay for the receiver. So it can be very expensive for the associations, and it's really something you want to avoid. So strategize with your attorney about what are some, ways that we can try to get people to serve on the board. The next thing is that we have to provide notice to the members of the annual meeting, and it's under Arizona law. We have to provide notice not less than 10 and not more than 50 days in advance of the annual meeting. So there's just like a 40-day window that we have to send out the notice of the meeting and the agenda and the absentee or mail-in ballot. And I also like to include in that mailing last year's annual meeting minutes, because that's something that we're going to be asked to vote on at the annual meeting this year. And so, again, we have that time period to do it not less than 10 days before the meeting, not more than 50 days in advance of the annual meeting. And we have to send this out, the notice of the meeting, by U.S. mail or hand delivery. And so it's important for the annual meeting that that, there's a special requirement for how the meeting needs to be noticed. And the notice is going to have to, of course, include the date, place, time, an agenda of what's going to be discussed at the meeting. And then don't forget to include last year's meeting minutes on the annual meeting ballot that you're going to be sending out, the absentee or mail-in ballot. So it's a good idea to have all this information checked by your legal counsel, especially the ballot. Especially if it's kind of an unusual year for the ballot, like you're amending the bylaws or the CC&Rs, or you're doing a special assessment. But typically the ballot will be set up in such a way that you're going to have the names of the candidates that are running. You're going to indicate, whether it's a secret ballot or not, and how that needs to be handled, how many candidates to vote for. You may also be including, if you have a special election on something, like I said, like an annual meeting, increase in the special assessment, or you have a increase in the regular assessment, that may be on there, or amendment to the documents. And then you also don't want to forget to have a spot for on the absentee ballot where people can vote to approve last year's meeting minutes, and you attach those to the mailing that you send out with the annual meeting. We also encourage you to have an agenda so that people who, want to attend the meeting, have the opportunity to attend the annual meeting. Okay. After you send out that notice of the annual meeting, you're trying to get a quorum, and your quorum is going to be, whatever's defined in your association's documents. Sometimes you have a higher quorum, like a 50% quorum or 51%. Sometimes you have 10%. Sometimes you have 25%. It's typically in your bylaws. If your bylaws don't say anything about the quorum, which, a small number of associations in Arizona don't have a quorum requirement, then we default to the Nonprofit Corporation Act, which is 10% is the quorum for the annual meeting. And again, what's quorum? Quorum is the minimum number of people that have to attend the meeting for us to move forward with the meeting and conduct the meeting. Okay, so after you send out the notice of the meeting and the agenda and the ballot and all the accompanying information, you really need to keep track of those ballots as they're coming in to determine how close we are to obtaining the quorum. So What we suggest for associations that have difficulty getting a quorum is that you start tracking it right away. And you send reminders by email. If people haven't voted yet, you send them a reminder by email. Now, some associations are using online voting now, and different companies that help associations with online voting. And you give the entire election to, the online voting company, and they'll do automatic reminders to anybody who hasn't voted. Now, mind you, if you decide to go with an online voting company, like kind of the ones that are rolling off my tongue are like HOA Vote Now is one that I think a lot of associations in Arizona have started to use. You want to remember that even though, you're providing the opportunity to vote online, in the notice that you send out, you should also give people an opportunity to get an actual paper ballot if they want it. So they should have a place to contact where they can get a paper ballot if they choose not to opt into online voting. And in addition, don't forget that O.R.S are always allowed to vote in person at the annual meeting as well. So you have to bring, ballots to the annual meeting. Obviously, if somebody's voted already online or by the absentee or mail-in ballot, they won't be allowed to vote again, right, at the actual meeting, and they can't change their vote either. Once they vote, it's done. It's irrevocable. But if you have somebody that shows up at the annual meeting and wants to vote in person, we have to allow them to vote in person before the meeting is, over and at the point where we, call for all the ballots at the annual meeting. So reminders of the annual meeting and reminders for people to return their ballot are an important way to get a quorum at the annual meeting. In preparation for the annual meeting, just remember I've had a couple of bad experiences over 29 years of doing this, where a few times I've showed up for the annual meeting as legal counsel and the manager forgot to reserve the room. And so now we're having a meeting at the library, but we have no room to meet. And so we want to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, that, obviously before we send out the notice stating where the meeting's going to be, that the meeting is confirmed and set up and the deposit's paid, so that it's very professional. Also, you want to go into the meeting really well prepared. And one way to do that is to count the ballots. If the board allows the manager or the attorney to count the ballots, usually the day of the meeting, what we'll do is we will count all of the ballots and put them into an Excel spreadsheet. And then it kind of takes the pressure off of the meeting. Then we only have to count the ballots that come in physically the night of the meeting. If you're using an online voting company to do the balloting, they'll just provide you with the summary that evening. And that's also a very seamless and easy way to do the counting or tallying of the votes. Create a sign-in sheet and make sure that you're logging the mail-in ballots or the absentee ballots on the sign-in sheet. Now, why is that important? Because we have to be able to give an answer in the minutes as to, what the quorum is. So how many people are there in person? How many people returned ballots by, the absentee or mail-in ballot way of voting or electronic voting way. And I really like going into the annual meeting, having that list of homeowners and highlighting the ones that have already been returned. So it's very easy to see that. And then anybody who attends the meeting in person, we highlight their name with a different color and have them sign in when they get to the meeting when we give them their ballot. Of course, before you send out the meeting notice and the ballot, you need to be dialed in to whatever the documents say, like typically it's in the bylaws. If there's any weird requirements, like does the meeting have to be conducted using a secret ballot? If so, there are some extra steps for the secret ballot, like you have to have a double envelope system and you have to explain it really well in the information that accompanies the ballot. Maybe you have cumulative voting, which allows a owner to accumulate their votes for one or more candidates. And if you have that, you need to strategize with your attorney as to how you're going to explain that or whether or not you're even going to use it if it's not mandatory. The other thing is, if you're having a meeting where you have high participation at your annual meeting, and I'm going to be honest with you, most associations do not have high attendance, and people get upset about that are on the board. They're like, nobody comes to the annual meeting, and it's upsetting to us. Actually, if you have very low participation at the annual meeting, what that means is that things are going great and no one's coming to complain. No one is coming to tell you you can do a better job on something. So it's actually a very positive thing. It's kind of disheartening when you're on the board and no one comes after you've worked so hard over the past year. But it actually is a good thing. People are happy with how things are going. Some of our associations, even if people are happy, they have very high participation at their annual meetings. And I can think of a couple associations that I have in Mesa, 55 and over communities, and then a number of associations in Sun City in the West Valley that are 55 and over, where it really is a social event. And there are a lot of people who are coming to the annual meeting, hundreds of people, in fact. And so if you are one of those associations that has high participation for your annual meeting, you want to plan ahead. And what I typically like doing is having like a little social hour for maybe the hour before the meeting starts, where people can check in, have a coffee or cookies or a donut or whatever, juice, and give people an opportunity to leisurely check in without having a line of 100 people. If your association is one of those that has a long line, typically what you should just do is have what I call a troubleshooter who's at the meeting helping you move that line along. And the best way to move the line along is to tell people, if you voted by absentee ballot or by mail-in ballot or electronically, you do not have to sign in. You just can go right into the meeting, and that will cut your line, significantly. Only the people that are signing in are the people that haven't returned an absentee ballot. And that should just be, very few people, because most people now are voting early for these meetings. If you do have a lot of people voting in person at the meetings, but you do have long lines, set up a good registration system with different lines for like A to L, M to P, P to Z, or whatever, is how you want to set it up, so that you can streamline the lines with 3 different desks that you can check in with. Having an accurate roster of owners is really important at the annual meeting. Now, I know it's hard to be perfect because ownership's changing sometimes, the week of the annual meeting, and we may not have the most updated information. So, double check the roster of owners the week before. And then if somebody shows up at the annual meeting and they say, I just closed on my property yesterday, have a computer or have your phone available where you can go and look on Maricopa Recorder's Office to see if you can find that deed showing that they're an owner. And if that's the case, you'll need to give them a new ballot if they can prove it. And then you'll need to search for the prior owner of that unit or lot's ballot and pull that out if that happens. And whoever is handling the meeting from the management company or the association's attorney needs to be on top of all of that. What you don't want to do is, if somebody shows up and they say, I just closed on my property and I want to come to the meeting and I want to vote, it's not a good, it's kind of a rare thing that happens. But if it does happen, you don't really want to upset them by saying, well, we don't have evidence that you're an owner. That's just going to really start off the relationship on the wrong note. So you could ask them for a copy of the deed. You can both look on the recorder's office quickly to see if you can find their deed. If you can't find any information showing that they're an owner, what I would do is give them a provisional ballot and just mark it as provisional. Don't count it that night. But if we find out later that, the recorder's office was delayed or something and it had been recorded and they were the record owner, we can always go back and count it if we need to at a future date. But just important not to start off the relationship with the new owner in a negative way, if at all possible. Another thing that's a really good idea if you have high participation annual meetings is have a greeter at the door to welcome members. Have your association documents there, because you'd be surprised. A lot of questions come up at the annual meeting, and sometimes you need to reference the documents. So either have an electronic way to get them or actually bring a binder with the documents, and your manager or your attorney should be doing that already. Provide enough registration materials. So even though you mailed out the notice of the meeting and the agenda and the meeting minutes from last year's annual meeting, which you'll be voting on at the annual meeting, people show up and they don't bring it. And so have enough ballots, for people that haven't voted, have enough agendas for everybody who you anticipate coming, enough meeting minutes from last year for everybody who's attending. Really, any of the handouts that you have at that meeting, please try to have enough for everybody, because people get really frustrated and upset if there's not enough, materials. And have a plan on how you're going to evenly distribute those. Maybe have a separate table set up where people can just stop by and pick up the materials on their way into the meeting. Actually, at the meeting now, how do we conduct the vote? So it depends how large your association is, and how many votes we have to count at the annual meeting. But if you have like 100 ballots to count at the meeting, you may want to have independent inspectors of election to count the ballots at the meeting. And if there's some sort of controversial topic that evening at the meeting or that day at the meeting, try to have somebody from each side of the topic, the controversial topic, so that nobody thinks that the side that's in favor of the special assessment is the only side that's counting the ballots. Try to evenly distribute, people for and against it, and have your attorney there overseeing the counting if it's something that's really controversial. The independent inspectors of election should take the tabulation that's created by the management company or the attorney the day of the meeting, and then they just add to those numbers whatever the numbers are of people who are voting in that meeting, at the annual meeting that evening or during that day. Nominations from the floor. Sometimes, we don't have enough candidates running, and we're going to be accepting nominations from the floor at the annual meeting. That's something that the board needs to talk about before the annual meeting. So, at one of the meetings prior to the annual meeting, there needs to be a discussion. Are we going to allow nominations from the floor? What do our documents say about nominations from the floor? Then announce it to the membership. So if you're not going to allow nominations from the floor, you need to put that on the ballot. If you don't have enough candidates, like let's say there's 3 positions open and we only have 2 candidates running, you may likely want to just put a write-in candidate on that ballot when you send it out, and then people can write their names in if they are interested in being on the board. Okay, really, who's running the annual meeting? It's the board. Even though it's the membership meeting, the board is running the meeting. The board should get through all of their business for the meeting, first, and then open it up to the homeowners to ask questions or to provide comments to the board at the end of the meeting. And really, the president is the person that runs the meeting. It's always nice to have like a PowerPoint if you have the capability or the room, or you could do that, or you can put the financials up on the screen. Maybe show some projects that you've completed this year, some accomplishments, maybe talk about some of the challenges that you've had. These are all really great ideas to help your association, have a successful annual meeting. Then towards the end of the annual meeting, after you get through all the business and the new candidates or the new directors have been announced for the new board, sometimes the board will, at the end of the annual meeting, will stay and they will determine who's going to be which officer position. If you're doing that, the annual meeting notice should indicate that that's kind of the last thing that the new board's going to do at the end of the meeting, so that you're giving notice that the board's going to be meeting and we're going to be determining candidates. Sometimes the board doesn't do it that night and they wait till the next meeting after the annual meeting, the first meeting of the new board, and they elect the officers at that point. And the typical officers are president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. So I think that's just a really good overview of how to run an annual meeting. I think we kind of covered all the common questions that, we have. One thing that I would really recommend is have a minute taker at the meeting that's going to be taking the annual meeting minutes, and do the minutes right away. Don't wait until next year to do them right before the next annual meeting. Do them. Actually, what I do if I'm taking annual meeting minutes at a meeting, I'm just have my laptop right there. I'm doing the meeting minutes as I go. I just put the same topics as are on the agenda and then only put on there what was decided, and key information like was there a quorum and that type of thing. And then before the meeting's over, I finalize them. It would take 5 minutes at the end of the meeting, finalize them before I leave the meeting, and then we're done with them, ready for next year when we'll be approving them at the subsequent next year's annual meeting. So really, that's a great overview of annual meetings. Now let's switch gears and talk a little bit about regular board meetings. So this would just be like the open board meetings that your board has every month, different from the annual meeting where you're once a year and you're electing directors. Your board meets typically once a month. A lot of boards don't meet in the holiday months, like November and December. Sometimes boards don't meet in those months. And sometimes in Arizona in the summer, because it's so warm and everybody's traveling, typically in July and August, maybe even September, maybe you might not be having regular meetings in those months. However, with the invention of virtual meetings, a lot of associations are meeting in summertime, even if you're spread around the country seeking cooler weather. Okay, let's talk about regular meetings and what are the laws that pertain to associations on how they conduct their regular meetings. So Arizona has an open meeting law that's specifically for HOAs and condos, and it's called the Arizona Open Meeting Law. It can be found for condominiums at 33 Arizona Revised Statutes 33-1248, and for planned communities, it can be found at 33-1804. All these are in the Arizona Revised Statutes. We have a great cheat sheet on the Arizona Open Meeting Law, which we're going to be sharing with you in our presentation today, and also for our Zoom participants, and also on Facebook Live. You can also find this cheat sheet on the Arizona Open Meeting Law on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. Just go to our cheat sheet tab on the homepage. Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of how to run an open board meeting. So first, board meetings pursuant to Arizona law are different or treated differently than open meetings for like city council or school boards. We have our own special law that just pertains to condos and HOAs in Arizona. And so even though it's called Arizona Open Meeting Law, and you may have an open meeting law for your school board or for your municipality or city that you live in, it's different for HOAs and condos. So here's what our law says for HOAs and condos. So first things first, board meetings are open to all members of the association. So regardless of what your documents say, all meetings of the association, board of directors, and regularly scheduled committee meetings must be open to all members of the association. Okay, so we have to provide notice of the meeting 48 hours in advance of the meeting. We have to provide an agenda with that notice. We, need to post that notice in the community. There's a number of ways that we can provide the notice. We can post it in the community. We can send it out by email. We can put it on our website for the association. It just says conspicuous posting or any other reasonable means. So most associations that we work with will email the notice of the meeting out to the owners, or they'll put it on the website of the association. And some also have a bulletin board where they'll post it for the association. Who can attend the meeting? So let's talk about, if the board meeting is open, who's allowed to attend. So any record owner, by record owner, I mean somebody who's on the deed and that deed's been recorded, can attend regular board meetings. Also, an owner can designate a person in writing to be their designated agent, and that person can attend the open board meetings or the annual meeting if they so desire. Owners and their designated agents, like we just talked about, the person that's designated in writing, are allowed to talk at appropriate times during the meeting under the law. Now, under the law, the only time that you're legally able to talk is before the board takes formal action on something. So if the board has a motion and there's a second and there's going to be discussion, if an owner wants to provide their comment during the discussion that the board's having, the board has to stop and allow them to comment. Now, we can put time limitations on the owner or their designated agent in terms of how long they can talk, while we're in this little discussion period. But you just need to know that under Arizona law, if an owner wants to say something before the board takes formal action on something, we have to allow them to do that. Also, many boards use what we call a homeowner forum, and this is separate it's a separate part of the meeting. Typically, we start the meeting with a homeowner forum in most associations. And maybe the board puts 10 minutes on the agenda and allows homeowners to say anything they want during that 10 or 15-minute period. So any homeowner can get up, ask questions, they can make comments, they can provide feedback. That's not mandatory, but it is something that's a good idea for transparency and so that homeowners feel heard. And also so homeowners don't have to sit through the whole meeting if they don't want to. They can just get up and say what they want to say, and then lots of times they leave after that. So that's a best practices thing that we suggest associations to do. Okay, so we talked about the agenda, and the notice needs to be given to the owners 48 hours in advance of the meeting. That's an important thing that you need to be aware of. There's also something that is important that's called an executive session, and that is a special right that the board has to close an open board meeting and go into what we call executive session to discuss certain topics that are outlined under the law. And so that's the board's choice. If they want to, they can close a meeting and go into executive session, but they're limited in what they can discuss in that it can only be a number of these 5 topics that we have that the legislatures allowed us to go into executive session to talk about. A couple things about executive session. It's typically just the board and the manager, maybe the board, the manager, and the attorney for the association. And homeowners are not allowed to attend the executive session. The intent of it is that you're discussing things that are confidential executive session topics. You have to notice an executive session as a board. So you have to give that 48 hours notice. You have to indicate which section under the law. We go back to the laws that we talked about. If you're a condo, 33-1248. If you're a planned community, 33-1804. You have to state with particularity which section under the law you're going to be discussing in the executive session in that notice. And have an agenda too. Now, you can't be too detailed on the agenda because you don't want to be, disclosing confidential things, but you should. Best practices is to have an agenda as well. So what are the topics that you can go into executive session for? I'm just going to give you like an easy, friendly guideline for that. So legal advice from your attorney. That's, the first thing you can go into executive session for. It can either be maybe the lawyer's there, or maybe there's an email that was sent with an opinion and the board's discussing that opinion. That can be done in executive session. Maybe the manager or a board member called the attorney and asked for advice, and that advice is being relayed. So the first topic you can go into executive session for is anytime you're getting legal advice from an attorney for the board of the association. Okay, the second topic you can go into executive session for is anytime you're thinking about suing somebody, or there's actual litigation, like you're involved in litigation as an association. So it could be an owner threatening to sue the association. It could be the association thinking about suing an owner, contemplating it, or we could be involved in, active litigation. It could be with a third party too. And so second topic that you go into executive session for is if there's pending or contemplated litigation. Okay, the next 3 topics that we can go into executive session are less common. And so one more thing on the second one, contemplated litigation or pending litigation. This could include violations and delinquencies. In fact, that's probably the most common reasons we would be going into executive session on the second topic. If we're talking about people that are paying their assessments in the association and violations. Okay, the next 3, 3, 4, and 5, we don't see very often, but I want to mention them to you because they are important. These are areas that you can go into executive session as a board, but they don't come up that often. So the third one is anytime the board has pending or personal health or financial information about a member of the association, a employee of the association, or independent contractor of the association, we can go into executive session. Now, how often do we have personal health or financial about an executive session to discuss? Some examples of this would be maybe you have an owner who has dementia or Alzheimer's, and that would be considered personal or health information. Okay, the fourth topic that we don't see that often, but I'm going to mention anyways, is the board can go into executive session to talk about the job performance of, compensation of, health records of, or specific complaints against an employee of the association or an independent contractor or individual employee of an independent contractor for the association. So occasionally we'll be talking about job performance of, an employee, if you have any employees of your association, or maybe a contractor that you've hired, or maybe you're negotiating the contract and you're talking about the compensation and how they've done over the past year. That can be discussed in executive session. However, if you're hiring or firing somebody or a contractor or an employee, that needs to be done in the open session. And then the last topic that we go into executive session for, which honestly we never see, very, very rarely, like once every, 10 years for me, is we can discuss a member's appeal of a violation in the executive session, or if the owner wants it, we have to do it in the open meeting. So if there's, like, let's say that we send a violation letter to an owner and they want to come to the meeting and have a discussion with the board, it can be done in executive session unless the owner wants it done in the open session. Now, why we don't see this very often is because nowadays the opportunity for owners to get feedback after they receive a violation letter, or get feedback after they, get a fine or levied against them, their opportunity to be heard is typically in writing now. Most associations are giving them that opportunity to be heard on a violation or fines by responding back to the board by a date certain with their written comments. Again, don't forget, before the board enters into executive session, the board is required to identify which section of those 5 sections we just talked about is the board's going to be discussing in the closed meeting. And the best way to do that, like I said a few minutes ago, is to put that in the agenda. Okay, a couple other things that I want to talk about, emergency meetings. Occasionally your board will not be able to wait 48 hours to have a meeting. And in those cases, the board has to have an emergency meeting. Some examples of emergency meetings would be there's like a fire and we have to make a claim on our insurance, or, there's something serious happens to, common areas. The definition is like, basically we can't wait 48 hours to notice a meeting. We got to take action now or it's going to harm the association. So, if you have emergencies that come up, the law calls for you to handle emergencies. Basically, you can have an emergency meeting with the board. You don't have to wait the 48 hours to notice it. You have to take minutes of that meeting as the board and identify what the emergency was and how you handled it. And then have at the next board meeting after the emergency meeting, you will read into the record at the next open meeting the emergency meeting minutes so that people are aware of the emergency and it was handled, in an open board meeting, so they're aware that you had this meeting without giving the 48 hours notice. And that's really the only way that you get around the open meeting law, right, is to have the emergency meeting, and it has to actually be an emergency. And then you have to read into the record at the next open meeting what happened, so there's transparency. A couple of thoughts on questions that I commonly get on regular board meetings that I think are important to be discussed. Number one, can we make decisions by email? So short answer is no. The board should not be making decisions by email. The only exception to that would be if it's an emergency meeting, and then you have to follow the emergency meeting procedures. Let's see. Do we have to provide an agenda to anybody who attends the meeting in person or virtually? Yes, you do. You provide the notice of meeting with the agenda, but also have a copy of the agenda for everybody so they can follow along at the meeting. What about if we're having a board meeting? This is a very common question, and we aren't deciding anything. We're just having a planning meeting or a strategy meeting or a budget meeting, and we're not voting on anything. Do we still have to make it an open board meeting? So yes, you do under the law. Anytime a quorum of board is meeting, even if it's an informal meeting where no topics are going to be voted on, including workshops, they must be open board meetings where 48 hours notice is provided, and the homeowners should be allowed to attend if they so choose. You don't have to allow the owners to comment at any time during one of these meetings where the board's not taking formal action if the board doesn't want to do that. Okay, a couple last things I want to say about board meetings. Arizona law is in favor of open board meetings. The statute says it. There's cases that say that, two administrative law judge cases that have talked about the open meeting law for HOAs and condominiums. Be careful about using email or unanimous consent outside of a board meeting to make decisions. The only time you could do that is if there's an emergency. Okay. Arizona law is very clear on anytime the board, quorum of the board is discussing association business, it needs to be an open board meeting. Now, also, we talked about committees, right? Some committees have to comply with the open meeting law too. And those are only the committees that have regularly scheduled committee meetings. Now, I don't have a lot of associations that have committees that have regularly scheduled meetings, but how you know if you're one of those committees that needs to apply to comply with the open meeting law is, is your meeting for your architectural review always the first Thursday of the month at 1 p.m.? If so, that's a regularly scheduled committee meeting. It needs to be an open meeting, and homeowners need to get notice 48 hours in advance. There needs to be an agenda, and you need to allow owners to attend, listen, and participate before the committee takes formal action on anything. Okay, let's talk a little bit about recording board meetings. So if we back up about a decade ago, the legislature started talking about recording board meetings and gave owners the right to record a board meeting. Last year, there were some additional requirements about recording board meetings. If a board is recording a board meeting, which is pretty common now because most of our boards are conducting business virtually using Zoom or Teams or some other platform. If the board is recording it, they have to keep that unedited version of the board meeting. This would just be the open part of the board meeting, not the executive session. You have to keep that open board meeting recording for 6 months. And if an owner requests to see it within that 6 months, you have to provide a copy of that to the owner. An unedited copy of that to the owner. We really don't have any problems with recording board meetings. And I can truthfully only think of one time since this new law has been in effect where somebody actually asked for a copy of the recorded meeting that the board had recorded. So it's not something that comes up very often, but just so you know, if you are having a board meeting and you record it as the board, you need to keep that for 6 months. Okay, what are some suggestions on how to have a successful meeting? Regular board meetings. So plan ahead is, the first thing. Use board packets and get those board packets out to the board in advance of the meeting so that the board members can come into the meeting kind of informed and ready to vote on things and aware of the issues that they're going to be discussing at the meeting. Conduct the meeting in a business environment. If you can believe it, I've been to a lot of meetings over the years. I've seen some kind of unprofessional places to have a board meeting. I mean, I've been to meetings at a bar where the entire board was drinking, which is a big no-no. I've been to board meetings at a funeral home because one of the directors had a job there and they had meetings there, which a lot of people didn't like that. Just try to have a meeting in a business environment. Now, if you don't have a clubhouse where you can have the meeting, you might be able to do the meeting virtually, by Zoom. So you get around having to have it in person. Or you could have it at a library or a church. You usually can rent rooms in both of those places for a minimal charge. Bring your board packet. If you're a board member, bring the board packet to the meeting so you can reference it and, stay on task as you're going through the different topics. Sometimes during the board meeting, you have conflicts. And when that happens, it could be conflicts between board members, or it could be conflicts between, an owner who's, agitated, upset with the board. So I want to give you some suggestions on how to best handle that. So if you have board member conflict, really consider having a boot camp. If you're in this situation, have our firm come in and talk with your board. There really is no reason for board members to be fighting amongst themselves. And you all are on the board for the same reason. You want what's best for the community, right? You may have different feelings about how to do that, or you may have different feelings about how the money should be allocated or what projects should be a priority, but all of you want what's best for the community. And, fighting as a board is unprofessional. It's okay to have discourse and it's okay to have disagreements, and we can't agree on everything, but do it in a professional way, where, people are respectful to each other and know that if you're not always going to win when you're on the board, you're not always going to get what you want. So you just have to understand majority rules. And having our firm come in and help you with a boot camp, talk through the issues, and talk about sometimes how different personalities handle different things when you're serving on a board, it really helps create a better understanding and will help you to function more effectively. And we have had 100% success. Anytime that I've gone in and done a boot camp with the board, we do them typically on Zoom. It's only like an hour. And we just talk about goals. We talk about what are the most important things you need to know about Arizona law. We talk about the conflicts. We talk about how we can get through the conflicts and how we can all work together. It's just a really effective tool that I hope that your board will consider if you're having board member conflict. Okay, let's talk now about what do you do if you have homeowner conflict. We call homeowners who come to meetings who are upset about things kind of our name that we like to call them, which we got from a CAI publication from many years ago, is a gadfly. So gadflies like to come to the meeting, they like to complain about everything. They like to accuse the board of improprieties. They like to scream and yell. They like to make threats. It's difficult to deal with the gadfly if you're serving on the board. As a matter of fact, it kind of makes you want to not serve on the board. So what are some effective tools to dealing with the gadfly? At the beginning of the meeting, say, here's how the meeting is going to be run. Here are the meeting rules. No yelling, no screaming, no talking out of turn, no name calling. And then just if somebody violates that, give them a warning and say, remember, we talked about the meeting rules for this meeting at the beginning of the meeting. If you violate this again, you're going to be asked to leave the meeting. No one should be allowed to interrupt the board while they're conducting business. The board, if you have a gadfly and they're talking during a time where they're allowed to talk, like maybe if you have a homeowner forum or before the board's taking formal action on something, when you're responding to gadfly, don't respond with anger. Don't raise your voice. Don't argue and don't trade insults. Okay, we don't have to rebut the comments of every member in the community. You can say, thank you for your feedback. You don't have to give a long answer to everything. You could ask them to stay after the meeting and we can talk about this in more detail, or we'll look into that and we'll get back to you. But you're not required to get into a long dialogue with the homeowners at the meeting. You're running your meeting. You're trying to get business done. Also, another really effective tool is to utilize parliamentary control. So parliamentary procedure, what are the most common things that you can use? Know when to table a motion. If you're going around and around and around, you can't make a decision at a meeting, table it. Come back to it next month. Know how to limit debate. Like say, okay, we're only going to talk about this for, a few minutes. And then we're going to, take a vote. Another really good suggestion, if you're having long meetings, like let's say you're having meetings that are 2-3 hours, which probably it's a nightmare. I know I serve on 2 boards right now. The meetings should be an hour. That is, you should be, if you're prepared for the meeting and the board comes in and is ready to make decisions, the meeting should be 1 hour. And a good way to do that is to set up the agenda with timed entries. So the meeting's starting at 8:15 a.m. We're going to establish a quorum at 8:15. We're going to, discuss and approve last month's meeting minutes, 8:15 to 8:20. 8:20 to 8:30 is the treasurer's report. 8:30 to 8:40 is the manager's report. 8:40 to 8:50 is going to be the committee reports, and then new business, and then the meeting's over. And then just stick to that time. So as soon as, if somebody's going over, you could say like, hey, you've got 2 more minutes and then your time's going to be up. So let's file this up. And if you don't finish a topic, you just have to push it to next month's meeting. And it kind of gets everybody really focused on what comments they're making and what we need to accomplish at the meetings. That's a really great suggestion on how to have a 1-hour board meeting. Okay, a couple more subjects before we're going to get into the questions. We have a great cheat sheet on our how to have successful board meetings that we talk about how to take perfectly proper meeting minutes. I get a lot of questions on how to take meeting minutes. So on our cheat sheet called, how to have a successful board meeting, I think it's called. We're going to be sharing that with you here if we haven't already. And then also it's on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. We give you suggestions on what needs to be in the minutes. And really the minutes should only be about 1 page. Okay, let's talk real quickly about virtual board meetings. We have a really great cheat sheet now on virtual board meetings. A few comments on it. Every association that we're working with is having virtual board meetings on Zoom or another platform. It's very, very common now. Some associations are doing hybrid where half of the rooms in person and half of the rooms virtual, but I haven't attended an in-person board meeting now in a couple of years. Everybody asks us to come on Zoom or, Teams or another Zoom. And I think homeowners are really liking having the virtual meetings because if they're out of state, they have an opportunity to attend the meeting. If they, don't feel like coming in person, they can just turn it on, not have their camera on, etc. So virtual meetings are becoming very, very common for associations, and I think it's really an effective tool for associations. Remember, if you're giving notice of your meeting and it's a virtual meeting, make sure that you're putting the Zoom link or the Zoom information, if you're using Zoom or whatever platform it is, in the meeting notice. I don't like it when they say, contact the manager if you want it. I think you should just be putting it in the notice. If owners are attending by Zoom, setting up a protocol at the beginning of the meeting as to how they can contribute, whether it's in the chat box or whether it's by raising their hand at appropriate times. A good thing to do would be to discuss at the beginning of the meeting how homeowners will be allowed to participate. You can give the agenda to everybody by doing a screen share at the beginning of the meeting. Also, they will have had the agenda prior to the meeting because you sent it out on the notice. Really, that's it for virtual meetings. They're becoming a very effective tool for associations to get business done, especially in the summer months when people are traveling. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how do we increase participation and increase annual meeting attendance in your association. I think we kind of already talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the class, but I'm just going to mention just a couple of tips. So if you're having trouble getting a quorum at your annual meeting, some suggestions are announce the annual meeting in many places. Have it, on your website, reminders being sent out on email, the actual notice that's mailed to the owners, putting up sandwich boards the day of the meeting, just a barrage of different ways to communicate to the owners that, hey, we've got the annual meeting, we need you to participate. Please attend or fill out an absentee or mail-in ballot. Have a social event. Have door prizes at the social event before the annual meeting. Have anybody who returns their ballot is entered into a drawing to receive $100 cash. These are all suggestions. Have prizes for, the best holiday decorations, best flowers, most beautifully landscaped home, whatever. And try to drum up interest of people to be involved and come to the meeting. Bring in a guest speaker, like maybe the police chief or a police officer to talk about crime, or maybe a local politician to talk about what's going on in the city. Aggressively pursue mail-in or absentee ballots. Contact people if they haven't returned it, make sure they're coming to the annual meeting. And don't forget as well at the annual meeting, thank everybody who helps throughout the year. Your manager, your management company, your landscaper if they're there, your attorney, the volunteers that help with the social committee or other committees for your association. Okay, next, a real quick topic we're going to talk about is getting volunteers to help. It's sometimes difficult to find volunteers. We talked about how to, attract board members. We have a great handout on how to recruit HOA volunteers, which we're going to be sharing with you. If you have trouble finding and recruiting volunteers to help with the different things that we need to run our association, we have a great cheat sheet that we're going to be sharing with you. And we hope you'll take a look at it if you're experiencing that problem. We had a great turnout today, 139 viewers at peak, and we had 9 of you here with us on Facebook today. So, really great turnout today, just under 150 owners here for our topic today, which is amazing. We have a couple of classes coming up in the very near future that we want to just give you some information on. So we have our First Fridays, which is our next learning opportunity is going to be on Friday, March 6th. And that is going to be our regular First Fridays where you can just come in virtually and provide questions. You give us questions through our website and we get online and answer questions. That's always the first Friday of the month. And the next one is going to be on Friday, March 6th. We also have a class coming up on the Scottsdale Neighborhood College. I'm sorry, I don't have the topic listed here. Maybe in the future, let's add that to the script for our future classes so that we know I can publicize on this class what the topic's going to be. So our next in-person opportunity to learn, I think it's actually coming up. I think the date's wrong on the script, so I'm not going to even say it. I think it is coming up next week. So, but double check on our website for more information on that. I can probably check real quick too. And that's going to be the Scottsdale class. Let's see here. The easiest way to look always is go to our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. And you just click right when you get to the homepage, you click on upcoming seminars and you'll see everything that we have coming up. And so our Scottsdale Neighborhood College is actually next week on Wednesday, February 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Scottsdale Mustang Library. And we're going to be talking about HOA finances. So we're going to be talking about from budgets, how to create a budget, how to follow the budget, how to amend the budget, how to read a financial statement, to fraud prevention. And that's going to be in person. And the city of Scottsdale is putting that seminar on. So it's next week, next Wednesday, February 25th, from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Mustang Library. If you're interested in attending that, you can sign up on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. Just go to the upcoming seminars tab. Also, we have our live virtual HOA Condo Academy for March coming up. So we've got the one in-person class next week for Scottsdale, and then we have the First Fridays for March 6th. And then we have our live virtual HOA Academy for March on my favorite day of the year, St. Patrick's Day. And that's March 17th. And that is, we're going to be logging on to Zoom and Facebook Live on St. Patty's Day at 11 a.m. And we're going to be talking about tough conversations and turnaround tactics. So how do we deal with difficult people, dysfunctional boards, and recalls of a board? What are some best practices for recalling a board? So, or if you're a board that's being recalled, how do you handle it? So we are going to have a great topic next month on St. Patty's Day for our neighborhood college. So just in some concluding remarks, thanks everybody for being here today. It's been a great class. I look forward to seeing you in March for First Fridays or our live virtual HOA Condo Academy. Or if you're attending our class in person next week at the Scottsdale Neighborhood College on Wednesday, February 25th. Have a great rest of February and look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.